Шановні колеги, всім доброго дня.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and we are going to continue our working day, and the topic of the next press briefing is on the preliminary results of UNO group on the use of mercenaries and the human rights. Our speakers are Patricia, Arias and Saeed Mokbil, who are the members of the working group of UNO on human rights and the use of mercenaries.
It's okay. It works, or I have to push somewhere?
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me start by welcoming you on behalf of the United Nations Working Group on the use of mercenaries, which composed of 5 members and established this in 2005. Including those members, it's my colleague Patricia Arias and me, Saeed Mokbil. We are, as you are aware, we are monitoring, this working group is monitoring mercenaries and mercenary-related activities in all forms and manifestations. We monitor also private, military, and security companies in all over the world. We study, identify emerging issues, manifestations, trends related to mercenary and mercenary-related activities and their impact on human rights, in particular, the right of peoples to self-determination. Our visit to Ukraine is to discuss with the government of Ukraine and other key actors and key players on their efforts on national level. So we are going on these issues. We are going to present our statement by our colleague Patricia, and then we are ready to answer all your questions. We thank you for your presence.
Merci beaucoup pour être ici aujourd'hui et pour être intéressé dans ce sujet.
Дякую за те, що ви прийшли сюди, щоб і цікавитися цією темою.
Thank you for coming here and to be interested in this issue.
Visit to Ukraine, which took place from 14 to 18 March 2016. The working group wishes to thank the government of Ukraine for extending an invitation to visit the country and also expresses its appreciation for the meetings held with various representatives from the executive, legislative and judicial branches of state, as well as with members of the diplomatic corps and civil society organizations. The delegation was also grateful to have met with the representative of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. The working group particularly appreciates the excellent support provided by the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine in organizing and facilitating the visit. The working group is mandated by the UN Human Rights Council to monitor the activities of mercenaries, mercenary-related activity, and the activities of private military and security companies. In this regard, it studies and identifies sources, causes, emerging issues, manifestations, and trends not only concerning mercenaries as defined in international law, but also mercenary-related activities and their impacts on human rights, notably on the rights of people to self-determination. The subject of foreign fighters has thus become a topic of interest to the working group due to its linkages to the phenomenon of mercenaries, and Ukraine is the third country that the working group is visiting to closely study the impacts of foreign fighters of human rights. From the outset, we wish to clarify that the recruitment and use of mercenaries is legally defined in international law in the 1977 Additional Protocol 1 to the 1949 Geneva Conventions, as well as the 1989 International Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries, to which Ukraine is a party. The criteria for a mercenary are taking part directly in hostilities motivated primarily by the desire for private gain, being paid substantially in excess of that promised or paid to combatants of similar ranks and functions in the armed forces of the party to the conflict, and not being a national of the party to the conflict or a resident of the territory controlled by a party to the conflict. The recruitment and use of mercenaries is prohibited by international law. With regard to foreign fighters, there is no internationally agreed legal definition of foreign fighters, nor a specific regime for governing them. A foreign fighter is generally understood to refer to individuals who leave their country of origin or habitual residence and become involved in violence as part of an insurgency or non-state armed group in an armed conflict. Foreign fighters are motivated by a range of factors, notably ideology, but can also be attracted, fight for financial reward. Foreign fighters are obliged to respect applicable rules of international human rights and humanitarian law during armed conflicts. The distinction between mercenary and foreign fighter is important in clarifying the situation of foreign armed actors in Ukraine. The self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic. Ukraine presents a very specific context marked by conflict and a corresponding complex array of factors, agendas, and constituencies. In this environment, a diverse spectrum of combatant engagement has developed, with significant impact on the human rights of the people of Ukraine and limited accountability. The events of the 2014 Maidan protest in Kiev and the 16 March 2014 referendum in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea were followed by the outbreak of armed hostilities in eastern Ukraine. The declaration of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic have not only precipitated the escalation of armed conflict in certain districts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, but also brought in an influx of fighters from abroad that have had significant influence on human rights in Ukraine. The working group was informed that foreigners joined combat to support all parties to the conflict. These foreigners came from various countries, mostly in Europe, and joined volunteer battalions on the side of the government and the armed groups of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People Republic and the self-proclaimed Luhansk People Republic. References to the use of mercenary by all parties to the conflict, and this require further analysis by the delegation in light of the specified definition of mercenary in international law. The working group commends the government for aligning the definition in its criminal code with the International Convention against the recruitment, use, financing, and training of mercenaries. The working group also notes the amendments to the Ukrainian legislation of October 2015 and December 2015 that allow for the incorporation of foreign fighters into the regular army of Ukraine and the National Guard of Ukraine, respectively. As such, most foreigners in principle can legitimately fight on the side of the government. The working group was informed by the authorities of Ukraine of at least 176 identified foreigners serving in armed groups of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People Republic and the self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic, and these reportedly include large numbers from the Russian Federation, Serbia, Belarus, France, and Italy, among others. Unfortunately, there was a lack of coherent information in our interactions with all parties to the conflict. This made it difficult for the working group to develop a comprehensive picture of the activities of foreigners fighting in the various armed formations. Moreover, it restricted their ability to make a determination as to whether certain fighters were legally mercenaries. Nonetheless, the working group believes that the information it has received points to several levels of foreigner engagement. These vary from volunteers to paid service men and women, and from independent militia members to professional military. The impact on human rights includes alleged cases of extrajudicial and summary executions, torture, arbitrary detention, and infringement of the rights to freedom of movement and of expression. The working group did not find any particular data on private military companies. It was informed that only private security companies operated in Ukraine and that the government oversees their activities, while a licensing regime regulates private security companies. The operation of private military companies is currently prohibited. The working group strongly recommends the regulation of this sector in the interest of preventing potential human rights violation. This is indeed the core preoccupation of the working group on this visit. Impunity for the human rights violations committed by the range of foreigners in armed formation is widespread and seemingly unquestioned, paving the way for a murky zone with negligible accountability. The working group learned that there have never been any prosecution for the specific crime of mercenaries in Ukraine. Some foreign fighters have been charged for indirect offenses such as trespassing of territorial integrity of Ukraine, participation in a terrorist groups or organization, participation in unlawful paramilitary or armed formations, but not for the human rights violations committed. The working group urged the government and the armed groups to fulfill their obligations under international human rights law and ensure respect for all civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights related to the activities of foreigners in armed groups. It recommends for the government of Ukraine to draw up a strategy and plan of action on foreign engagement in the armed conflict within the framework of the Minsk protocols. About recruitment, the working group learned that much of recruitment of foreigners into various armed groups was undertaken through social media and other online communications, where information on the conflict as well as contact information for follow-up enlistment was readily available. Recruiting offices, including allegedly in the Russian Federation, also allow for in-person informational sharing and processing of recruits. About motivations. The motivation of foreigners joining to participate in armed conflict in Ukraine reportedly vary. The working group was told that many were inspired to fight for ideological or political reasons and others for financial compensation. In addition, some foreigners were from a criminal background, and information shared also indicates that some convicts were offered the option of imprisonment or service in the conflict. The working group also received data that foreign women have also been combatants in the armed conflict in much smaller numbers. As a first conclusion, the working group recommends full implementation of the Minsk protocols. In particular, it supports Provision 10 of Protocol 1 on the withdrawal of illegal armed formations and military equipment, as well as fighters and mercenaries from Ukraine. Provision 1 on ensuring an immediate bilateral ceasefire, and Provision 7 on continuing inclusive national dialogue. In moving forward towards full accountability for violations of human rights by foreigners in armed groups in Ukraine, the working group urged advancing beyond recognition of the role of foreign combatants in the armed conflict to addressing their impact. Concrete steps for monitoring, reporting legislation and legal action will mean incremental achievement of justice for victims of violation and the erosion of the harmful culture of impunity for acts committed during the armed conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patricia. Thank you, Mr. Saeed. We'll be starting a QA session. Let me ask you the first question. As you know, Moscow's UN Human Office shut down not so long ago, and some experts state that many steps by the Russian government to close international human rights work in this country. So, in your opinion, why has it happened? And how do you plan to cooperate with Russia further on? There's a microphone right there.
Donc, nous avons appris que le bureau de l'ONU pour les droits de l'homme à Moscou a été fermé récemment. Et donc, peut-être il n'y a rien peut-être d'étrange, mais à votre avis, quelle est la raison de la fermeture de ce bureau de l'ONU à Moscou pour les droits de l'homme?
There's a microphone right there. Yeah. It's switched on already.
That's okay. Ça marche déjà.
En réalité, je n'ai pas une réponse pour votre question. C'est très spécifique et sûrement ça répond à plusieurs raisons, pas à une seule raison. Peut-être les personnes qui nous accompagnent du bureau de l'ONU peuvent avoir plus d'informations, mais vraiment, je n'ai pas une réponse.
На жаль, у мене немає відповіді конкретної, тому що, можливо, тут різні причини можуть бути цього закриття. Але я, можливо, особи, які нас супроводжують, представники Офісу ООН.
Maybe representatives of UNO in Ukraine can explain this fact. We don't know proper information on this issue. So you can ask in English or in Ukrainian If there's no questions and comments, we end our press conference.
Mais si vous n'avez pas de questions, nous allons terminer donc notre conférence de presse.
Dear guests, thank you for coming and looking forward to the closest future. Thank you a lot.
Merci beaucoup d'avoir exposé votre avis et j'espère de vous revoir encore. Merci beaucoup.